Hey everybody, it's your friendly tour guide John Jennings, and I grew up watching Gordon Eastman outdoor and hunting videos, and so I always want to say, "Come along with me and let's live an adventure." This won't be quite that fun, but we are going to talk about the second piece in this criteria topic. Here we go. So I know we just used this slide in the last session, but I wanted to touch base on it again. The conditional use application is the first pathway and the simplest for obtaining approval. That's a proposal that would be reviewed and approved by a local planning commission or a hearings officer, usually a planning commission. Second is the goal exception process, which is more detailed, more complicated, has multiple parts. That would be reviewed by a planning commission generally, or hearings officer, almost always planning commission. But the final decision is made by the local elected officials. Those include multiple hearings, right? So there's more moving parts, hence more risk. And the third pathway is going to FSEC. And again, that's not something we are going to talk too much about because it doesn't really apply here. So this table really just attempts to illustrate the range of project sizes that would be subject to local jurisdiction. The numbers on the left-hand side, speak to a conditional use proceeding. On the far right-hand side, indicate a project size that would trigger FSEC jurisdiction. So you see that the biggest projects that would be subject to local county government jurisdiction would be 3,840 acres. That's about the size of the Obsidian project that we viewed down in Christmas Valley. So just what in the heck is an exception? So this is a term as part of the Oregon planning lexicon, and it really refers to an opportunity. It's created in statute, state statute, and in statewide planning goal 2 that enables a local jurisdiction to consider allowing a use or uses that wouldn't otherwise be allowed based on what the goals require. These provisions are further and more completely interpreted in LCDC's Rule Division 4, and across the board they require that the local comprehensive plan be amended, and that the exception that results in that plan amendment be carried out by implementing ordinances. A real quick example might be lands that are currently planned and zoned for exclusive farm use that really resemble a rural residential neighborhood. So the county, based on that level of parcelization and settlement pattern, moves to recognize that by taking an exception. They amend the comprehensive plan from a EFU designation to a rural residential designation, and then rezone those lands from exclusive farm use to probably rural residential 10 would be the right designation. Now, then those lands are eligible for additional consideration. They can be subdivided. They can have homes approved on those, but that subsequent development is subject to the new zoning. So we're just going to try to ease into this area of the rules. There are 3 types of exceptions: physically developed, irrevocably committed, or reasons. We're just going to focus on reasons. That's what's applicable in this context. And this area identifies that we can take an exception for any use that's not allowed, or for use that's authorized by a statewide planning goal that cannot comply with the approval standards for that type of use. And that's where we are with these solar projects. Now, solar in of itself is available, but those larger projects are not. So it's a matter of being able to go beyond those acreage thresholds in the rules that require an exception. So justifying a reasons exception begins with identifying and satisfying criteria in this area of the rule, 0022. They are listed by categories, and with each categories has actual criteria. I have listed that here, obviously. But what you don't see is a category that says photovoltaic solar. We'll get to that in a moment. A reason exception can be initiated by a county itself or by an applicant. And it's probably just as common for an applicant to initiate one as anything else. So in this step in the process, it requires the identification of one of these categories. Doesn't have to be all of them, just one that fits, right? And 2 that had seemed to fit were the first one and or the third one. So uses not specifically provided for, or rural industrial development. However, the courts had interpreted these provisions to mean that one, photovoltaic solar really wasn't rural industrial development. And furthermore, with regard to the first piece there, that there was not a demonstrated need for solar or any renewable energy based on one or more of the requirements of goals 3 to 19. What this left was didn't forbid an application from moving forward, but it was left for an applicant to really kind of sort of figure out what that meant. And in the absence of any real clarity or guidance, there's a lot of risk. So to iron out this wrinkle, the courts created for us, where the acceptance process really wasn't a very good fit for solar projects, the legislature directed LCDC to add language identifying that photovoltaic solar could be considered a rural industrial development. So that's what we did. This happened in November last year, and this language creates, we believe, an identifiable pathway for counties and project developers to be able to rely on. So here we are. Here's the criteria that helps determine if a rural industrial development has reasons to justify allowing something that's not otherwise allowed by the goals, like a larger solar project. I'm not going to read them, but you see there's 3, and now we're halfway there. So if and only if an application can demonstrate compliance with the 0022 sub 3 provisions, they get to go to the 0020 provisions. That's the second half of the criteria. I don't know why we wrote it backwards like this, but we did. But this is where the second half of the criteria live. Here's a quick rendition of the criteria, 4 principal criteria in 0022. The reasons justify the goal shouldn't apply. B, the areas that require an exception can't use. Basically, it's an alternative analysis. C, the environmental, economic, social, and energy consequences are no worse there, and that the use can be compatible. All right, y'all, we're just about done. If the exception criteria can be satisfied and the county approves that proposal, then there are concurrent amendments to the plan to level that out. It still needs to be implemented. And customarily, that's implemented by retaining an exclusive farm use zoning district with some sort of overlay or other type of feature that identifies that the project size can be larger, but still retains the requirements for these kind of core standards, siting standards. Also, when an exception has been justified and the EFU zoning is retained, it is not necessary to apply these criteria, the general 01305 criteria, which can be kind of a tall order. But the act of taking an exception essentially viewed, and it's included in statute, as satisfying these provisions. So they are not necessary. The arrangement for forest is similar. I'm not going to go into that. Just enough probably to say that the same sort of order of operations would apply on forest land there too. Woo! Holy catfish, you guys. That was a lot. I don't have the heart to go into the ORS 215-446 stuff now. I'm just going to wrap. If you made it to the end of this, let me know, because I'd like to shake your hand or buy a Daniel Webster cigar. But that being said, thank you so much for your time and interest, and continue to approach this with an open mind and a creative spirit, a sense of humor, and a sense of adventure.